Is everybody having a good day? So technically, this is the first day of the festival. For me, it's like day 3. And I do have a couple of notes. This is our 9th year. Can you believe that? That, there's people that have actually come here every year for 9 years. What's wrong with us? I just got a couple of little things here while we wait for people to drift in, and then we will get to the keynotes, which are my favorite part of the festival. Just a couple of things.
We're going to ruin it for you, Randy.
I've been up here giving them a hard time for the last 5 minutes. Okay. Because this is our 9th year, what is next year?
10.
Next year's our 10th anniversary. And because anniversaries are cool, we're going to try and do some cool stuff next year. We have started brainstorming. We're going to brainstorm some more in the fall. But one thing we already decided to do was to reduce the price of adult passes by $5.
Wow.
So we are not an expensive festival, and now we're going to be a less expensive festival. Yeah, we're cheap. Now, I am Scottish. You can tell. But yeah, we're going to try and do some fun stuff next year just to mark our 10th anniversary. So that's one thing. The other thing we're doing is starting tomorrow, you can register for next year online. So you don't have to wait to Sunday and fill out the paper form. Our registration people have told us that they cannot read anybody's handwriting. So they would much rather you went and registered online. So that's available starting tomorrow. But we will still have paper on Sunday for those who, like me, are dinosaurs. Okay. I want to thank a few people because I don't do this by myself. Some people think I do, that I just kind of hold this party and people show up. But no, I actually have a lot of people helping me. We have organizers that work throughout the year, and we have volunteers that work throughout the weekend. They're not here having fun like the rest of us. They're actually here doing hard work. Can we get a little round of applause for those folks? That includes our hotel staff. I have worked with 7 hotels in this city, and I have investigated others, and this is by far the best hotel in Calgary. But there are other volunteers. All of our presenters are volunteers, including these fine people at the counter, at the table here. They are all experts in their field, and they all volunteer their time and their expertise to engage us, entertain us, and educate us throughout this weekend. So let's get a big, heavy round of applause. We also have some sponsors. One of the reasons that we're not that expensive is we have sponsors like Calgary Arts Development, Alberta Foundation of the Arts, Calgary World Fantasy Society, Dodge the Bullet Comics, Tyke Books, the Century Bach Books and Games, IFA, the Imagination Fiction Writers Association, and the Calgary Public Library, and others who don't want to be named, who either financially or through services helped this event happen. So can we get a little clap? Now, how many presenters do you think we have this weekend? How much? 100. Anybody else? 200? Do I hear 300? We have over 200 presenters this weekend. A lot of generous people. And among those presenters, we like to actually highlight some that we actually call our festival guests. And this year we are honored to have with us Kat Flannery, who, if you are not familiar with Kat, she's a best-selling author in multiple genres. Her most recent series, The Montgomery Sisters, incorporates historical, Western, and romance. So don't just write in different genres, write in all of them at the same time. Yeah. We also have James Allen Gardner. And if you're not familiar with James, he's an award-winning science fiction author whose style greatly influenced my own. I met Jim, I don't know, 20 years ago? Yeah. Workshopped some manuscripts with Jim. Excellent author and all-around nice guy. We have Lisa Mangum, who, in addition to being a best-selling YA author, is managing editor of Shadow Mountain Publishing. So, if you're really good at an author, sometimes they pull you in, they give you a raise and make you manage your publishing house.
Wait, we get paid for this? I get paid to read books?
Well, no, that was never in the contract.
Oh, okay.
We also have thriller author Jonas Saul. Now Jonas has been with us before, just attending, and this year he's an honored guest. He's perhaps best known for the best-selling Sarah Roberts series. He's published a few books, but he also has some other books, which I've quite enjoyed. Outside of Sarah, I enjoy Sarah Roberts too, but I've enjoyed your other works as well. And we also have children's book author Leanne Shirtliff. Now, Yulin was here last year. Were you here the year before or just last year? Just last year. Liked us so much she came back. Now, as far as I can tell, she's dabbled in just about everything. But she kind of focused herself on the children's books. So if you have any interest in children's books, talk to this lady. She's here they're all here all weekend. Now, I think we're all ready to hear some wonderful keynotes. Who loves the keynotes? My favorite part of the weekend. We are going to start with Lisa.
Thank you. Wow, this is exciting, and I get to be first, which is also exciting. Thank you so much for having me here. This is my first time in Canada. It's my first time here at the conference, and you all have been just so generous and so kind, and I feel like I already belong, and you are already my friends. And so I'm really honored to have this chance to kind of tell you a little bit about myself and a little bit about my journey, and maybe leave you with a few things that I hope will carry you through this weekend and maybe even beyond. The first thing I want you to know about me is I've always been a dreamer, even when I was little. And so I suspect most of you are as well. And so I want you to think about whatever it is that you dream about. You don't have to tell anybody, and maybe it's that you're going to finish that first manuscript, or maybe it's you're going to get published, or maybe it's something not even related to books or to writing. But I want you to just kind of keep that in mind of what it is that you have been dreaming about, maybe for a long time, maybe just recently. But when I was growing up, I dreamt about words all the time. I grew up in a house where books were honored and revered, and I learned to read at a really young age, and I've always loved to write, and I've always loved to read. And a lot of that came about from my mom. In fact, one of my very earliest memories was getting a copy of The Secret Garden and taking it to my mom and saying, "Would you read this to me?" And sitting in the big green rocking chair in the living room, and she read that book to me. And I was 3. And I still have that copy of The Secret Garden in my library, and I still have that green rocking chair. And I still think about that all the time because that really sparked my love of books. And I've never looked back from that. All of these years later, I've always loved story in all of its forms, short stories and novels and movies and TV and everything. And so I grew up writing short stories and novels and scripts and really bad poetry and everything I could think of, because I just loved telling stories so much. And I just knew in my bones, my very marrow, that I was going to write a book, and I was going to be the youngest New York Times bestseller ever, and I was going to make, I was going to change the world. And then I went to middle school. And even though my mom is a writer, and she taught me how to tell stories, and she taught me how to read, and I knew from her that it was a thing people did. It was a job that people did, was be a writer and be a storyteller. I went to middle school and I started to think, yeah, but maybe I'm not good enough to do that. Maybe that's a dream that other people have. I recently found my 8th grade autobiography, because you've lived your whole life by the time you're in 8th grade. And I was really startled to see I had written right there in there, I've tried writing, but I'm not very good at it. And so I don't think it's something I'm going to do. And that little voice in the back of my head started to take root that said that writing and storytelling was something that other people did. It was a dream other people had. And so I stopped writing. And I stopped writing for a really long time. But I never stopped believing in books, and I never stopped believing in words. And so I figured, well, if I'm not going to be a writer, because I'm not good at it, and it's not something I can do, then what else can I do that will keep me in books? And I remember distinctly being at the bookstore one day, and I picked up a copy of Melanie Ron's The Dragon Prince, because I loved fantasy, and I read the back, and I suddenly thought, who writes the stuff on the back of the book? Because I could do that, right? I'd get to read the book probably early, like before anybody else, right? I could read the book really early, and then I could write a couple paragraphs about a book. I mean, I'm not a good writer. I can't write, but I could do that, right? It's just a couple paragraphs. That's all it takes. I'm going to do that. And it turns out that editors write the stuff on the back of books. And so all of a sudden, I changed my perspective. I changed from saying I'm going to be a writer to I'm going to be an editor. And luckily for me, my mom was also an editor. And so she also showed me that that was a thing people did, that there was a job people had, and that you could be successful at it. And she taught me all the proofreading marks, and we talked all the time about writing and language and story, but from a really technical viewpoint and not so much from a creative standpoint. And we would talk about the minutia of everything. I mean, one of the things that I love, we would joke about how for hours we could talk about the benefits of paperclips, like the pros and cons of like when to use them, and like different kinds of inks and pens and Post-its. Like that was us. That was what we would talk about. And we loved that kind of part of the process. And so it turned out that I was really good as an editor. I was really good at telling people what was wrong with their book and helping them fix it. And it made me really happy to do that. So I went to college with the intention of being an editor. I went to the University of Utah and I got my degree in English. And every time somebody said, what do you want to do? I said, I want to be an editor. And they all said, can you do that with an English degree? Yeah, you can. It's really helpful that way. And to my everlasting surprise, 4 months to the day after I graduated, I was hired as an editorial assistant at a publishing house in town, which like never happens. And a couple years later, I was promoted to assistant editor. And then in 2014, I was promoted to managing editor. And I've been in books ever since. I've been in books my whole life. In between that journey, I spent probably those first 10 years of my editorial career not writing, except for the stuff on the back of other people's books. Until one day my friend Tony, who worked in accounting, said, we're starting a writing group, and we kind of heard that you sort of kind of write. Do you want to do something with us? And I'm like, yes, I do. And so Pam from HR and Tony from accounting and like a couple other people who are not in publishing, and me, we'd meet every Thursday. We had formed a little writing group, And that was the first time in a long time that I gave myself permission to write something for me. And I loved those Thursday meetings because they were a safe place to fail, and they were a joyous place to succeed. And I had so much fun writing an epic fantasy that to this day has never seen the light of day. Because I was 300 pages into writing an epic fantasy when I got this idea to write a young adult romance, which of course is naturally what you do, right, when you're in the middle of an epic fantasy. But I had this thought, what would I do? I was going to a conference for YA writers, and I was thinking, man, what would I do? What would I write if I was going to write a YA romance or a YA novel? And just like that, the characters jumped in my car and the story downloaded, and like I knew what this book was about. I knew it was going to be a trilogy. I knew where book 1 was going to end. I knew where book 2 was going to end. I knew where book 3 was going to start. I had my villains. I had names. I had snippets of dialogue. In 45 minutes of the drive down to the conference, I had it all mapped out. And I pulled into the parking lot and I wrote everything down on the back of somebody else's manuscript that I had with me, and I was ready. I was ready to go. And my boss was there at the conference, and I'm like, Chris, look what I did. There's going to be this great story. And I like just poured it all out, and he just looked at me and he said, when did you do this? I'm like, on the drive down. It doesn't matter. This is going to be the best book in the history of ever. And he said, you should write this. And I'm like, of course I'm going to write it. Don't be silly. Which was a big change from the girl who thought that writing was for other people, that storytelling was something that other people did. And I latched onto that story, and I wrote that story, and that became The Hourglass Door, which was my first published novel. And I wrote it in 8 months, which is pretty fast for somebody who'd never really done that before. And it got published 2 years to the day of when I got the idea, which is super fast. And now I'm really happy to say that I got to write the stuff on the back of my very own book. It was really exciting. And part of the reason why I was able to do that, why I was able to write that book and sit down and do that is actually a story, an experience that Tony had, that he shared with us that very first day all those years ago back when we were doing our writing group. And he said he was on his way home from work. He was on the bus, and he was on his way home from work, and they stopped, and he looked out the window, and there was this ramshackle house, like rotted roof, no yard, no shutters, peeling paint, and in the driveway was parked a brand new, pristine, white Lamborghini. And he thought to himself, there is a man with priorities. They may not be the right priorities, but he has them. And we vowed that day, and when we started our writing group, that we were going to make writing a priority. We were going to make it work for us. And that is how I kept that in mind. I kept thinking every day, I'm buying the Lamborghini. I'm doing it. Even though I was working full time, I made time to write. I'm buying the Lamborghini. It's a priority for me. I didn't want to be a someday writer anymore. I wanted to be a today writer. And so I wrote all the time. And I wrote 3 books in 3 years. And I worked full time. And it was kind of crazy. And people seemed to like my book. They won awards, and I kept writing, and I kept telling my stories, and I kept finding that success, and I kept finding that chance to tell my story the way I wanted to tell it. And I didn't have any better champion or any better cheerleader than my mom, who the very first day, the day my ARC came to the office, the first thing I did was take a copy over to my mom to show off and do a little book signing with her office. And I tell you that story because I want to just tell you the five things that I learned from that journey. The first is you have to buy the Lamborghini. If you're going to write whatever it is, whatever dream it is that you are following, at some point you have to make it a priority. You have to say, it's not going to be a someday dream, it's a today dream, and I'm making it a priority. And if that means you have to give up something else, like painting your house, then you do that because the priority is your dream. And that can make it worth it. It's okay also if your dream changes partway through. I often think about those years that I wasn't writing and think, man, what could have been? If I had not stopped, how many more books could I have written? How many more stories could I have told? But I have to balance that by saying, yeah, but in those same 10 years, I learned how to be a damn good editor. Like, I concentrated on that dream, and I was good at it, and it was a talent that I was able to perform and work on perfecting, and that was okay. It's okay that my dream changed a little bit and that I could come back to it when I was ready. I also learned through this process that inside of you there is a story that only you can tell. I firmly believe that, both as a writer and as an editor. I've seen so many stories come in, and the thing that makes them different is the author voice and the author passion that I can tell. And if you have a story that you're telling, you know that you are the only one that can do it. I want to hear the story that you are writing, because the way you tell it makes a difference. The fourth thing is a quote that I encountered at Disneyland one year, which is my favorite place to go. And it just said, "Don't hurry, don't worry, don't stop." And I love that because the journey is long. As a writer, you may spend years working on a manuscript, or working on getting an agent, or waiting for your book to get published, or writing another one. It can take a long time. That's okay. Don't hurry your way through the journey. Take your time. Get to know the people that you're traveling with you. Get to know the people who are just ahead of you, or the people that are just behind you. We're all in this together. Don't rush so fast that you miss out on the good stuff that's happening today. And don't worry if you don't get it right the first time. Don't worry if people don't get it. Don't worry if it takes a while. Just don't stop. The last thing is that hope is kind of the whole point. I've told you a little bit about my mom. And in 2 weeks, it will be the anniversary of her death. It was very sudden, and it was very sudden. And even though she's gone, she's not really gone. And at various points in my life in this last year, I have felt her, and I've thought about her, and I know she's been close to me. And I know because I find paperclips. And when I sat down today, right before we started, I looked down, and there was a paperclip right here. And so the message from me and from my mom is that your dream is closer than you think. That is what she taught me by her life and her example. That was the encouragement that she always gave me, is that your dream, whatever it is closer than you think. I want you to think about that dream that you have, and I want you to raise your hand as high as you can. Okay? Now raise it a little higher. Did you see what just happened? Did you feel it? You all went just a little bit higher. Just a little bit higher than you thought you could. And that is how close your dream is. So I encourage you to just reach out a little bit higher. You have it in you, and you can do it. And you're going to get the thing that you are striving to get. I do believe in you, and I know that you can do it. Thank you.
Thank you, Lisa.
You're welcome.
That was a moving story.